please clear it once it's over here.
So we can begin? Huh?
Yes. Sir, with your permission, shall
Yeah.
we start?
Let's start.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this post-policy press conference, fifth for the financial year 2025-26. We have with us Governor, Reserve Bank of India, Shri Sanjay Malhotra, Deputy Governors, Shri T. Ravishankar, Shri Swaminathan J., Dr. Poonam Gupta, and for the first time, Shri Shirish Chandra Murmu. We also have with us today Executive Directors, Dr. Ajit Ratnakar Joshi, Shri Indranil Bhattacharya, and for the first time, Shri Sanjay Kumar Hansta. I also welcome my other colleagues from the Reserve Bank. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping announcements. Sir, there are 26 participants from the media. I'll be requesting the media participants to please stick to one question so that everybody gets a chance. I would also request everyone to switch on the mic while speaking so that those watching the live telecast are able to listen carefully, clearly. And once you have finished speaking, please switch off the mic. Sir, with your permission, I will now call out the names.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. I would request Ms. Latha Venkatesh from CNBC TV 18 to please ask the first question. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Bridgeraj.
You are the opening batswoman.
Opening batter, they have made it these days. Governor, let me begin with the inflation forecast, since you all have brought it down from the earlier two policies ago. You had forecast Q1 next year at 4.9. Now the forecast is 3.9, and then 4 for the next quarter. Also, you're saying that if you remove gold, it would be 50 basis lower. Would you say that gives the MPC further space to support growth? And while at it, if you can also give us your comment on the currency, do you think it was undervalued? What is the RBI's approach to the currency?
So two questions. Whether there is more space going forward. We are at neutral today. We believe that, as you have also alluded and as I mentioned in my speech and in my assessment, the important thing is that inflation is very benign. It has been benign, 3.5%. You know, if you exclude food, which has been volatile, last 2 years it has been 3.5%. And going forward too, if you exclude gold and precious metals, silver, our expectation is that it is going to be very benign. Now, whether that opens up a policy for further rate cuts, that will be, getting into speculation. I don't want to get, into that question. For me, the more important thing now is that having reduced the policy repo rate by further 25 basis points, we have to now, concentrate on the monetary policy transmission. And considering the fact, that inflation is going to be very benign, I think let it first transmit into the real economy, and then we'll see, as to how inflation behaves, how the growth inflation dynamics behave, and we take it policy by policy. Second question on the rupee. See, our stated policy always has been that we allow the markets to determine. I mean, we don't target, any price levels or any bands. We allow the markets to determine the prices. We believe that the markets in the long run especially are very efficient. It's a very deep market. We saw this earlier in February. The rupee to dollar had climbed up to almost 88. And within a period of 3 months, it came back to below 84. So these fluctuations, this volatility does happen, can happen. Our effort has been always to reduce any abnormal or excessive volatility. And that is what we will continue to endeavor. Our external sector, as I also mentioned in my statement is very strong going forward. We do believe that we are having sufficient reserves. Current account is very manageable at about 1% or so. And given the strong fundamentals of our country, we should get good capital flows as well going forward. So I think we are in a very comfortable situation insofar as the external sector position is concerned.
Thank you, sir. We'll take some more questions from our left side before we move here. So for the next question, I will ask Mr. Mayur Shetty from Times of India. Mayur, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Governor. Governor, historically, the current account deficit was of around 2% was seen to be manageable because we had this capital flows. But now, with this flows coming down, is there a change in what you see as manageable? Is it around the present level? And a second part of the question was, you cut the rate despite the recent volatility in the rupee, and many forecasters had revised their expectation. So, does this is it reflecting your comfort with the situation in the Forex market?
Yeah, see, as mentioned even earlier in one of my post-MPC conferences, we are mostly, the MPC is mostly driven by growth inflation dynamics, especially, given the fact that ours is a domestic demand-driven economy. I mean, our dependence on the external sector, it's a small percentage of our total GDP. So we continue to do so, and that's why while these factors are, of course, considered by the MPC, but given the growth inflation dynamics, this decision was taken. Your first question, I think, I don't have more to add to what I told in response to the first question by Lata, which is that we are at a very comfortable. I do not expect the CAD, to be as high as 2%. Some of the numbers, that you are giving out, and so on the external sector side, we are very comfortably positioned.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Ankur Mishra of ET Now to ask the next question. Ankur, please.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Good afternoon, Governor. I want to draw your attention towards the growth revision this time. You have revised it upwards. While surprises are always welcome, but last 2 quarters, the growth has been much more than what RBI has forecasted. So therefore, I want to understand what has been reasons for that. And more importantly, last time when I asked you a question about the aspiration, you mentioned 7% plus should be the aspiration. Now that you have forecasted more than 7%, 7.3% now, do you think the aspiration should move towards 8%?
So you could have also have said 9%. 7 plus can mean, anything, right? So that is the baseline. When I said 7, that is really the baseline, because these are difficult things to actually estimate as to what, our potential GDP is. Of course, aspirations can be, can be very high. And so having delivered, of course, 8% now on an average last 3-4 years, certainly this is certainly, well within our reach, and we should certainly, aspire for anything which is in that region.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you, sir. I'll now request Anup Roy of Bloomberg to ask his question. Anup, please.
Thank you for the opportunity, sir. Sir, the markets were expecting some kind of rupee measures in this policy. And in October, we have seen RBI was probably intervening heavily, but it stopped intervening, and then rupee rapidly moved to 90. So are you comfortable with this kind of level for rupee?
I don't have anything more to add than, what I, I think you people don't have more questions.
Yeah.
It
Sir,
seems
sir, I will then
because
ask,
you-
sir,
Same question, has
sir, I will
been
then ask that how does this
repeated,
dollar rupee swaps help in this context? Because it is not infusing.
It's more of a liquidity measure.
Yep.
It's a liquidity measure. It's not to support the rupee. And your first question I also already answered, that we don't target any level, whether it is whatever levels are there. So we don't target any level, and we only allow for we just let the rupee find its correct position, correct level and band,
Thank you,
just for an orderly movement.
Thank you, sir. I'll now request Hamsini Karthik from Money Control to ask a question. Hamsini, please.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. What would your message to banks be in terms of credit growth? Usually the barometer is that credit growth is 2x GDP. That's the ballpark with which we normally work, right? But it's now, GDP is ballpark of 8%, credit growth is just around 11%. And what is that number? You've done a lot of front loading now, 125 basis points reduction in repo. Transmission has also been quite healthy, healthier than what we've seen in the last cycle. What would your message to banks be? And what is that magic number in terms of credit growth that you would like to see will bring a smile to your face?
I think I don't know where you get the 2x figure of credit to GDP growth rate. Last 10 years, it's been more or less 1x. More or less, it's been 1x. And we have done well. The growth rates are also, real growth rates are about 7%. When one talks about 2x, those are the times before 2011, 12, before earlier, we used to have very high credit growth rates. And you did see what impact, it had on bank asset quality. So I don't think, 2x is the kind of number that we are looking at. We don't target any particular growth rate for the economy. Let's keep in mind that these things are mostly dependent on the structure of the economy. The monetary policy has a role only, in the short term, not in the long run. We can't accelerate or decelerate the rate of growth of the economy and at the same time of credit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We'll now take a few questions from this side. I'll request Sangeeta Mehta from Economic Times to ask a question.
Thank you, sir. Sir, in the policy statement, you have said that growth is expected to soften somewhat. Could you elaborate why do you expect growth to soften? And you've already answered the aspiration question, so that was my other question.
See, we are going by whatever are the high frequency indicators that we track. So it's basis that we feel that the growth that has been about 8% in H1 will not be of the same order. We have already given out our numbers for this quarter and going forward. If you look at the various sectors, we can separately. I don't have those details right now, but we can give you separately those details. Okay.
Details on?
On which sectors will probably not do as well as historically or in the past they did. And would you like to? Do you have some numbers? Would you like to add over here?
I think the main thing that I can add is that base effects will play out as well. Currently the growth rate is very, very high. So when one is talking about softening, it's from these very high levels. Sectorally, I think the outlook is highly resilient on each one of the sectors. So this small softening that we are talking about will be distributed across sectors primarily based on the base effects.
And some of it is also export led. So we had earlier reduced the growth rates because of the high tariffs. So all those sectors which are which are tariff impacted, for example, textiles, leather, to some extent gems, jewelry, shrimps, these sectors certainly, although they have a very small component in our total economy, they will certainly be impacted.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, madam. I will now request Manojit Saha from Business Standard to ask his question.
Good afternoon. You have not mentioned there is space for supporting growth in this policy. So that was mentioned last policy, I think last to last policy also, but this time. So from a real rate point of view, which according to RBI's last report 1.4 to 1.9, is there any space for a real rate point of view? And also wanted to know whether implicit in the assumption behind to the decision was there is no trade deal with US. Was it also a consideration? That very unlikely a trade
No,
deal?
that's not a consideration. See, as I mentioned to you, ours is mostly a domestic demand-led economy, and whatever is the impact of the tariffs, higher tariffs, that has been already included in our projections. So it is not on account of the higher tariffs. It's a totality of things that we look at. Space, as I again mentioned, it will depend going forward, will be data driven as to whether there is further need, scope, first of all scope, and then whether there is a need. All I can say is that going forward we expect benign inflation, and so if the inflation continues to be the way it is, we expect the rates, the policy rates, to be low and not high. Whether now what rate it will be, that will be getting into speculation. But going forward, we expect benign inflation, and so we do expect low policy repo rates rather than higher policy repo rates.
Thank you, sir. I will now invite Vishwanath Nair of NDTV Profit to ask his question.
Good afternoon, Governor. The comments on Rupee that you made, we don't want to target levels, step in when volatility. Has that threshold of stepping in changed at all? As in, is there a point in the volatility where you're saying, okay, this much volatility is fine because it's the market forces at play, but beyond this is where we'll step in? And the second part to that is then this historically low inflation and blistering growth doesn't seem to be felt on the ground level. So I'm just trying to understand where the dissonance is. People on the ground not feeling the inflation come down that much, nor that the pace of growth is as fast as it is.
I don't know. I mean, where do you get this? Because we do rely on the numbers that are given out. I think there is a good growth. Inflation is certainly very low, and especially if you take out precious metals, I think it is being felt on ground as well. Of course, there can be, because there is a geographical distribution to it. Some states it's lower inflation, some states it's higher. The consumption basket again of various sectors, segments of society is different. So there can be differential realization. But on the whole, inflation has certainly come down. You look at historically, it used to be about 7% and 5%, and now it's even much lower. So inflation has come down. Growth, of course, if you look at the improvement in the living standards of people, that has certainly over the years it has improved. So undeniably, I think it's being felt on the ground. It's a very hard, your first question is very hard, to put a formula or as to how, it's more an art than a science over there, and so that's what we try to do in managing.
Has your tolerance increased of the volatility? That's the core of the question.
The definition of volatility.
For me, it has remained the same, and I think even for the RBI, I don't find, that there is much of a change. We'll have to see, as to, one can go back and look at the numbers and calculate for oneself as to whether volatility the number is there. One can calculate what the volatility has been there, and you can find out, if the volatility index, VIX, or whatever, you can calculate it and find out as to whether volatility has actually increased or decreased over the years. But we don't think that there has been any conscious attempt to change our tolerance to volatility.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Swati Bhatt Shetty of Thomson Reuters to ask a question.
Thank you, sir. Governor, today you've reiterated multiple times that inflation, the underlying pressures on inflation are really low. I just wanted to understand what are these factors. I mean, yes, food prices down, precious metals like you mentioned, but is the consumer demand also not picking up, particularly in urban areas? Is that also leading to low inflation? And secondly, related to that, are we also feeling, the spillover effect of the Chinese overcapacity kind of leading in? It's happening in other Asian economies. Are you also feeling that in India? And also, is such low inflation really a good thing for an emerging economy? 0.25% is really low. We are way below 2% as well. So is this the right level of inflation for an economy like India? Thank you.
Certainly not. I mean, 0.2 is not the right level of inflation. We target 4%, and so, it's that kind of an inflation that we try to achieve. At the same time, I don't think we should be, looking at really, 0.2%, because there are going to be fluctuations. There is going to be volatility in markets, whether it is Forex markets, Vishwanath asked that question, or whether, it is the Sensex, stock markets, or whether it is prices in general, that volatility will be there. And, some of the impacts are also, because of the base effects. Earlier, you had very high food inflation, and so now, because of the base effects, it seems to be low. But underlying inflation, as we have said, is certainly, on the lower side, and that's why we gave this rate cut.
So consumer demand and the Chinese deflationary pressures, can you please?
Yeah, I mean, all these things, it's both the supply and the demand side factors, and both of them are at play. One can't, and it will be, sector to sector, it will depend. So if it is food, it's more, the supply side factors. It's not, so much the demand side factors. And so it will depend, on sector to sector. There cannot be, one answer as to whether it is only demand or only supply, or which one is more. I think it's a combination of both demand and supply factors. And because there are demand side factors as well, that's why we have reduced the repo rate. We have been, in an easing cycle to further support demand.
Thank you, sir. I will now invite Piyush Shukla of Hindu Business Line to ask his question.
Yeah, good afternoon, Governor, DGs. Sir, two questions. First is on your rate cut. You mentioned about transmission happening. Banks are caught in a fix because there's increasing competition on deposit growth that is there. CASA, there is a challenge to build. Do you feel today's rate cut will translate into lowering of deposit rate as well? That is one. Second is on the annual report that had come out. It had mentioned about gold, RBI bringing back more gold, 64 odd tons of gold in H1, bringing back to India. Is there a conscious effort to bring back, physical gold held in foreign countries, considering that some of the foreign nations have, plowed back because of the war, they have held back on certain countries' gold. Is there a conscious effort by the RBI to bring back the physical gold held in other countries? Thanks.
We are diversifying, it's not good to have all your gold, at one place. So there is certainly a diversification effort that is behind, this move. What was your first question, sorry?
Will today's rate cut in
depositors?
Terms of, yes.
See, we have to actually be looking at the real interest rates. When inflation is so low and going forward also, it's going to be low, then even though the nominal interest rates may seem to be low, the real interest rates today are quite high. So that's true not only for borrowers, but also for savers. And so we do expect that going forward, especially after this repo rate cut, deposit rates will to some extent moderate.
Thank you, sir. We'll have some questions from the left side again. I'll now request Ekta Suri of Z Business to ask a question.
गुड आफ्टरनून सर। सर मेरा सवाल होने वाला है कि अगर बहुत सारे मंच पर हमने सुना कि सेबी चीफ ने ये कहा कि बैंक्स जो हैं उन्हें नॉन एग्री कमोडिटी डेरिवेटिव्स का हिस्सा बनना चाहिए, तो क्या इसके लिए बैंकिंग रेगुलेशन में आने वाले दिनों में क्या कोई बदलाव हो सकता है? ऐसा मुमकिन है? क्योंकि उन्होंने एक से ज़्यादा प्लेटफॉर्म्स पर इस बात को कई बार कहा। और दूसरा ये सर कि विदेशी बैंक्स में फॉरेन निवेश आ रहा है, तो पीएसयू बैंक्स में आपको लगता है कि जो एफडीआई की लिमिट है वो 20% से ज़्यादा होनी चाहिए ताकि वहाँ पर भी विदेशी निवेश आए और कहीं ना कहीं पीएसयू बैंक्स भी जो हैं और उनकी रोबस्टनेस में वृद्धि हो?
पहला प्रश्न आपका है ऑन
कि क्या बैंक्स जो है वो निवेश कर सकते हैं नॉन एग्री कमोडिटी?
सेबी ने जो प्रस्ताव भेजा है वो अभी प्रस्ताव हमारे पास में अभी हाल ही में आया है और उसका हम अध्ययन करेंगे, लेकिन आपको ये मैं बताना चाहूँगा कि बैंकिंग रेगुलेशन अधिनियम के तहत इस प्रकार की गतिविधियों में बैंक को सम्मिलित होना वो वर्जित है, वो अलाउड नहीं है आज के दिन में। तो इसमें कानून में संशोधन होना पड़ेगा। ये केवल एक रेगुलेटरी मुद्दा तक ही सीमित नहीं है। दूसरी बात, पूर्व में भी इस प्रकार का प्रस्ताव आया था, तब इसका परीक्षण किया गया था और तब इसे उचित नहीं समझा गया था। क्या अब इन 8-9 वर्षों में कोई स्थिति में बदलाव हुआ है, इसका हम अध्ययन करेंगे। उचित नहीं होगा कि मैं आपको कोई उत्तर बिना उसका प्रोज एंड कॉन्स का अध्ययन किए हुए मैं आपको दूं।
बट सर अभी अध्ययन वाली स्टेट तक
नहीं, अभी हाल ही में यह प्रस्ताव आया है, तो इसलिए ये उचित नहीं होगा कि हम आपका इसके ऊपर में कोई आपको मैं रिस्पांस आपको दूं।
और सर एफडीआई लिमिट जो पीएसयू बैंक्स में 20% के आसपास है, उसमें क्या, क्योंकि प्राइवेट बैंक्स में पैसा आ रहा है?
ये जो मुद्दा है ये भारत सरकार के क्षेत्राधिकार में है कि क्या उन्हें ये उचित लगता है कि 20% से इसे बढ़ाना चाहिए या नहीं बढ़ाना चाहिए। तो इसके ऊपर भी मैं कोई टिप्पणी करना अभी उचित नहीं समझता।
धन्यवाद सर। I'll now request Anurag Shah of ET Now Swadesh to ask his question.
थैंक यू सर। सर सबसे पहले तो बधाई सर, आप 1 साल पूरा कर रहे हैं। 125 बेसिस पॉइंट की हमने कटौती देखी और आम लोगों को उम्मीद होगी कि आगे भी ये जारी रहेगी। सर मेरा सवाल है सर 81 बॉन्ड से जुड़ा हुआ सवाल।
डिपॉजिटर्स के लिए इंटरेस्ट रेट्स बढ़ते रहेंगे और लेंडर्स के लिए इंटरेस्ट रेट्स कम होते रहेंगे।
यस सर।
होना चाहिए, एफिशिएंसीज बढ़नी चाहिए बैंक्स की भी निश्चित रूप से।
यस सर। सर मेरा सवाल सर 81 बॉन्ड से जुड़ा हुआ है। इन दिनों काफ़ी चर्चा में 81 बॉन्ड, कई सारी सरकारी बैंक के 81 बॉन्ड से पैसा जुड़ा रही है और कई सारे निवेशक सामने आए हैं हमने जिन्होंने शिकायत की है कि एक मामले में उनका पैसा शून्य हो गया। और सर वहाँ पर हमने देखा है कि इंश्योरेंस रेगुलेटर आईआरडीए के द्वारा भी आरबीआई को एक पत्र लिखा गया था। आईआरडीए के चीफ ने कहा कि ये इस फैसले से जो इंश्योरेंस कंपनियां, लाइफ इंश्योरेंस कंपनियों का जो काफ़ी नुकसान हुआ है और उसमें आम लोगों का पैसा था, तो उस पर सर आरबीआई का क्या कहना है? और जो आम निवेशक है उन्होंने कई बार कहा है कि मिस सेलिंग की वजह से हमारा जो पूरी ज़िंदगी भर की पूंजी थी वो शून्य हो गई और ऐसी कोई कठोर कार्रवाई नहीं की गई है। और आरबीआई ने भी कहा था कि हम कुछ गाइडलाइंस लेके आएंगे 81 बॉन्ड से जुड़ी हुई रिटेल निवेशकों के लिए। और सर जब मिस सेलिंग होती है बैंकों के जरिए और 81 बॉन्ड के अलावा हम दूसरी चीज़ें भी देखें तो बैंकों के जरिए जो क्रेडिट लिंक प्रोडक्ट बेचे जाते हैं, बंडल्ड प्रोडक्ट जिसमें लाइफ इंश्योरेंस, हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस वगैरह, वो बाकी विश्व भर के करीब 38-40 देश है वहाँ पर रेगुलेटेड है या फिर बैन है, तो क्या आपको लगता है आरबीआई को कि इस बात को भी संज्ञान में लेना चाहिए, जिससे जो मिस सेलिंग एक बड़ी चिंता है जिसपे सर आप भी काफ़ी आपने भी अपनी राय दी है, वित्त मंत्री ने भी उस पर चिंता जताई है, तो उसको आम लोगों को भरोसा दिया जा सकता है?
नहीं, बिल्कुल। देखिए 81 बॉन्ड का जहाँ तक प्रश्न है वो मामला अभी उच्चतम न्यायालय में लंबित है, तो उसके ऊपर में अब जब मामला विचाराधीन है तो कोई टिप्पणी करना उचित नहीं होगा, तो उसके बारे में मैं कुछ नहीं बोलना चाहूँगा। लेकिन मिस सेलिंग निश्चित रूप से हमने पहले भी कहा है, पुनः मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि हमारा सभी रेगुलेटेड एंटिटीज़ को, बैंक्स को ये निर्देश हैं, और सुपरविजन में भी जब वो जाते हैं तब भी इस बात का ध्यान रखा जाता है, देखा जाता है, ऑडिट किया जाता है कि क्या जो भी हमने नियम बनाए हैं, कानून बनाए हैं मिस सेलिंग के बारे में, जो वर्जित हमने किया है कि मिस सेलिंग में यदि बंडलिंग जैसे आपने कहा, तो उस प्रकार की कोई कार्यवाही, उस प्रकार की कोई गतिविधि नहीं होनी चाहिए। ये हमारा सतत प्रयास रहा है, और उसी प्रकार से जैसे इंश्योरेंस है, तो इंश्योरेंस के लिए IRDAI ने भी नियम उन्होंने भी लाए हैं कि कम से कम 3 प्रोडक्ट्स जो है, 3 इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज इत्यादि का साथ में टाई अप होना चाहिए। तो सभी रेगुलेटर्स, रेगुलेटेड एंटिटीज़ के साथ में मिल कर के हमारा ये प्रयास रहेगा कि आगे आने वाले समय में और अधिक हम अपने नियमों को और अपने सुपरविजन को हम और सुदृढ़ करें, ताकि मिस सेलिंग की जो शिकायतें हैं, मिस सेलिंग जो फिर भी कुछ जगह पे होती है, वो और कम हो, और इस प्रकार के जो भी कोई मिस सेलिंग के हमारे पास में वाक़े सामने आते हैं, उनके विरुद्ध में हम लोग कठोर से कठोर कार्रवाई भी करते हैं और करते रहेंगे।
धन्यवाद सर। I will now invite Hitesh Vyas of Indian Express to ask his question.
Hi sir, good afternoon. I just want to check, is there any calculation being done on the impact on inflation in case rupee currency fall by 1 rupee, and what that number would be?
No, we have our figures. I think 5% of depreciation leads to about 35 basis points of inflation, and on the other hand, it also helps exports and GDP growth by about 25 basis points.
Thank you, sir. I will now invite Ben Jose of the New Indian Express to ask his question.
Yes, sir. The question is again on the inflation impact. You have revised down by 60 basis points.
Sorry?
Inflation is forecast for 2% for the year.
Right.
Do you expect the rupee to improve, or you have factored in at 2%, you have factored in the impact of the rupee at say 90 or what? What is the assessment of that?
Yeah, we have factored in, the current levels of rupee in our estimates.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll now request Mr. Mahesh Naik of Financial Express to ask his question.
Thank you
Mahesh,
very much,
this
sir.
side, yeah, sorry.
Just earlier in April, you mentioned that you are comfortable with the system liquidity of 1% of NDTL. In the last quarter, we haven't seen on an average, which is below that level. Are you still comfortable, or have you changed your view? And if yes, please explain. And if you are still maintaining any projections until March for infusing internal guidance for infusing liquidity into the system?
See, as long as monetary policy, monetary transmission is happening, especially at a time when it is happening, I want to again reiterate that we will provide sufficient liquidity so that the monetary policy transmission happens. Otherwise, and so that's why it is a little surplus. It's on the higher side. Otherwise, you do not need so much of a liquidity. Perhaps you need to only. Perhaps you can do with lower than the kind of liquidity that we have been providing as of now, which is not of the order of 1%, but which has been, of the order of between 0.6 and 1% or so, right? And sometimes going above also 1%. I think with this 1.5 lakh, almost 1.5 lakh, it will go beyond 1%. It will go beyond 1%. So that's the range, that we are looking at. I don't think the exact number should make too much of a difference, 0.5 or 1 or 6.6. The important thing is that we will provide sufficient liquidity to the extent it is needed for the banks to provide reserves. Why is liquidity needed? It is needed primarily to provide banking reserves to the Reserve Bank of India. It depletes because of currency in circulation, because when you give currency, you take the deposits. To that extent, the deposits reduce, currency increases. Or, when you do a Forex, if you sell dollars, you take out from the banks those deposits. So their liquidity, the amount that they can keep towards the banking reserves. Or otherwise, it changes because of the banking reserve requirements, changes in banking reserve requirements because of higher deposits, etc. So the banking liquidity is, as of now, sufficient, and we continue to maintain
with your due permission,
ample liquidity.
With your due permission,
I would not say, that I am targeting, a particular level of 1%, etc. I'm only giving you the confidence to the system, to the banking community, that there will be ample liquidity, especially as long as we are in this phase where the interest rates have to go down, right?
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll take some more questions from this side. I'll now invite Aryan Khanna of Inforus Media to ask his question.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. Governor, you've spoken a lot about liquidity already. Just something on the nitty-gritties of it. In November, the RBI bought bonds in the secondary market. The market speculates was tied to the maturity of a GSEC at that time. Is this going to be the RBI's policy going forward as well? And then would you also consider it in the OMOs to come to add longer term bonds than 15 years, which has typically been the cap that you've held so far in the current year, and or state bonds if you want to add that to your own on this thing? On a related note on the liquidity management framework, there's been only one auction under the new liquidity management framework of 7 days. The 7-day operation is now the primary operation under the new liquidity management framework. So any comments on that going forward?
So your second question, let me take, your second question. So in the new liquidity management, our effort primarily is to keep the operating target, which is the Walker, at the policy repo rate. And so therefore, so we have now, the flexibility in the new liquidity framework to do a 1-day overnight, to do a 3-day, 7-day, depending on, the liquidity conditions that we foresee. And accordingly, those VRR and VRRR operations are done. Your first question related to the tenors of the GSEC OMOs that we will do, you will come to know shortly. You will come to know. It's a matter of few hours. We will put it out. We'll put it out. Thirdly, I would also like to mention that it has been our endeavor that we give out a diversified, balanced OMO, a balanced, supply of government bonds in various maturity periods, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term, depending on the needs of the economy and the demand thereof. Previously, in the first half, over the years, of course, the average maturity has increased. The average maturity has increased. In the first half, there was perhaps an excess of the higher maturity, higher period GSEC auctions. And but going forward, I think that has been reduced. That calendar is also out with you. So we'll provide a balanced mix depending on what the demand of the economy is.
Sir,
SDL also will you buy?
SDL we will not be buying.
So one part of my question was that the maturity of the bond that perhaps the RBI was holding is what the market estimates. Would you continue doing that? Would you buy bonds to replace maturing securities on your portfolio?
We'll be buying right now 1 lakh.
Correct, correct.
Yeah, so.
You have there's another maturity in January.
You are getting too ahead of times. I have already mentioned that we will provide sufficient liquidity. It is dependent, and I made it very clear in my speech that it is for liquidity reasons that we do OMOs and not for any other reasons. Primarily, right? Primary reason is to provide liquidity, and depending on the demand supply position, which are the securities we target. Going forward, it will again depend on what the liquidity needs are, and then we'll decide as to whether we need to do more OMOs or not.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Shama Mishra of Doordarshan to ask a question.
नमस्कार सर, माय क्वेश्चन इज़ ऑन ऑनलाइन फ्रॉड. यूजुअली हम देखते हैं कि प्रिवेंट करने के लिए तो बहुत सारे इसमें जो भी तरीके होते हैं, बट एक बार इंसान का कोई व्यक्ति का पैसा जब चला जाता है तो बहुत कम उम्मीद होती है कि उसका पैसा वापस मिल सके. इवन व्हेन दे गो एंड कंप्लेन, बहुत जल्दी भी कंप्लेन करें तो भी. इस दिशा में क्या आरबीआई कोई कड़े कदम उठा रहा है?
सबसे पहले तो जो ये गंभीर विषय है आपने जो उठाया है, बहुत ही सामयिक विषय है और गंभीर विषय है. आरबीआई हर तरह से भरसक प्रयत्न कर रहा है कि सबसे पहले फ्रॉड न हो. उसके लिए कई कदम हमने, आरबीआई ने, बैंक्स ने, जो लॉ इन्फोर्सिंग अथॉरिटीज़ हैं, एमएचए ने, कई सारे कदम हमने उठाए हैं. जैसा कि आपको मालूम है, जागरूकता के लिए भी हमने, लोगों की जागरूकता के लिए अवेयरनेस कैंपेन्स अभियान हमने कई सारे किए हैं. जहाँ तक रिकवरी की बात है, आपका ये कहना बिल्कुल सही है कि रिकवरी, एक बार पैसा फ्रॉड होने पे और खोने के बाद में वो उसमें कम अंश ही मिल पाता है. ये मामला अभी हाल में जो है ये न्यायालयों में विचाराधीन है. कुछ जजमेंट्स आए हैं. केरला हाई कोर्ट का एक जजमेंट आया है जिसमें उन्होंने आरबीआई को कुछ निर्देश दिए हैं. फिर नागपुर बेंच, हाई कोर्ट महाराष्ट्र, उनका एक निर्णय आया है जिसमें उन्होंने भी कुछ निर्देश दिए हैं. और ये मामला अब सुप्रीम कोर्ट में, उच्चतम न्यायालय में विचाराधीन है, विशेषकर इस बात पर कि एक बार जब फ्रॉड हो जाता है तो उसका पैसा किस प्रकार से रिकवर किया जा सके. तो इसके ऊपर में, सभी स्तरों के ऊपर में आरबीआई, न्यायालय, एमएचए सब मिलजुल करके किस प्रकार हम न केवल इसको रोकें, कम करें फ्रॉड्स को, बल्कि एक बार यदि पैसा चला जाता है तो उसकी हम रिकवरी किस प्रकार से जल्द सुनिश्चित करें. उस पर बहुत गंभीरता से आरबीआई में, सरकार में और उच्चतम न्यायालय में मामला विचाराधीन है. हमारा प्रयास रहेगा कि मिलजुल कर शीघ्र इस समस्या का हम समाधान निकालें.
धन्यवाद सर. I will now invite Subhana Sheikh of Mint to ask a question.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Governor. So I wanted to ask, our estimates on nominal GDP are far more accurate than our estimates on real GDP. And now with IMF also, they have graded India as C on their data quality on GDP. How does that make the RBI's assessment? What is your assessment say? How difficult does that make your job? And also, they have also reclassified India's de facto exchange regime from stabilized system to a crawl-like arrangement. What's your view on that? And sir, one last on transmission, I wanted to ask. There has been an increase in interest rates on new loans in October that shows that the transmission of rate cuts via banking system has reduced. So with the new rate cuts, do you expect an impact on transmission? And also bond yields have relatively slowed down. The transmission on bond yields we haven't seen as much. So any view and as to how this would evolve going forward?
So let me take your last two questions, and your first two questions on GDP and exchange rate. I'll ask my DG to come in. She deals with IMF more regularly, and our estimates. Although I believe that our estimates, GDP, inflation, GDP especially, which comes out, and CPI, which the MOSPI gives, they are fairly accurate. Of course, there is scope for improvement. But I'd leave that question, including the crawl-like exchange, on DG Poonam Gupta. I'll answer your other two questions. You asked 3-4 questions in one. Very smart of you. So interest rates, you said, have gone up. Lending side, vis-a-vis, I think you are comparing last 2 months' data. So as I also explained in my statement today, interest rate effect is now 79 basis points. But if the proportion of higher interest rate loans, like for example, retail loans which are unsecured, or gold loans, for example, because gold loans also, they are very high interest, they are higher interest rate loans. If their proportion goes up, the average interest rate goes up. It does not mean that transmission has slowed. Okay. The interest, so that's why, we are now giving, so the number for you, the number that you should be looking at is actually the interest rate effect, whether the interest rates have come down or not for different segments of loans. But all segments do not have the same interest rate. Housing loan may be, as low as 7.5% or 8%, whereas some of the unsecured loans may be, much higher, 10, 11%. If the share of those loans goes up going forward, then the average interest rate goes up, even though the interest rate on each and every segment of the loan has come down. I hope I was able to explain that point.
Yes, yes.
Second thing, bond yields. This has engaged the attention of everyone for a very, very long time. As I mentioned, first of all, the primary, target that we have is our operating target, and then, it transmits onto various other interest rates, including your bond yields. If you compare your bond yields now with the bond yields earlier and the spreads, they are more or less similar. They are not, the spreads are not higher. Please keep into account that when the policy repo rate will be lower, the spread will be higher. Please keep that into account. You cannot expect that the spread, what it was at 650, the same spread for a 10-year bond, to have the same spread as, at 550 or 525. So, but historically, if you look at what the spreads were, when our repo rate was 5.5, 5.2, 5.15, 5, etc., the bond yields today, or the spreads today, are not very different. They may on an average have been lower than they were earlier. This is one point, I want to clarify to everyone, because this keeps coming up. Perhaps why, this question keeps coming up is because they had gone down very low to about 625 or so, or 615, 617. Lata has all the numbers. So they had gone down, you know. Why did they go down is a question that we all of us need to sit down and think. I think one major reason was that we did a lot of OMOs at that point of time. And so it is also a demand and supply thing. Ultimately, end of the day, it is, of course, your expectation of your policy rate path, long term. It's, of course, an expectation. That is one factor. But keep in mind also that it is primarily, ultimately, end of the day, it will be the demand and supply. And so, you know, we had created that excess supply through these OMOs that we did, which pushed it down, which I would feel perhaps was lower than, you know, otherwise they would have been. I mean, that can be one explanation for why, you know, they had, apart from other things which have changed, you know, over a period of time, apart from other things. That's not, you know, that's not to say that's the only reason. Yeah, DG Gupta.
Thank you. Thanks for those two questions on the IMF. So first on the data quality issue. We engaged with the IMF as a part of the Article 4 consultation, but also throughout the year. The point that they're making on what is perceived to be the quality of our statistics is a very limited one. They have a taxonomy based on whether the data provided to the IMF has some gaps which hampers the surveillance. It's not about the quality. Some gaps which hampers the surveillance. And when they looked at, based on this criterion, a number of data series for India, inflation, IIP, fiscal accounts, and national accounts. As per their taxonomy, they gave a taxonomy of A or B to most of the series and only a C to national accounts. And when one digs further into their footnotes, it's about the base revision. It's not about the quality of data. It's not about the sanctity of the numbers that are put out. It's about a base which has been perceived to be dated. With this revision, I think they would be satisfied on this count. On exchange rate, so again, what the IMF does and what others do is they put exchange rate regimes into 3 different categories: fixed, floating, and managed float. Only a handful of countries currently have a fixed exchange rate. Most of the advanced economies have a free float, and all the emerging markets have shades of floating, managed floats, and this is what India practices. Now, within the managed float, which is that RBI tries to curb undue volatility on each side of a reasonable level, IMF looked at the past 6 months of the data, and they found this volatility to be contained in a range that they have in mind. And based on that, they had a sub-classification which is called crawling peg. Again, I would not read much into it. It's just based on the cross-country comparison of India having this much volatility compared to some other countries. The fact remains that India is a managed float, just like most of the emerging markets are.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, madam. I will now request Krishna Kaushik of Financial Times to ask his question. Thank you. We'll now have some questions from the left side. I will now invite Lalatendu Mishra of The Hindu to ask his question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Governor. What has been the impact of the tariff on the economy, and if the trade relief measures have addressed certain concerns of the exporters? If you can please comment on that.
So, impact, as I said, you know, I think I answered this earlier also, that ours is mostly, it's a minimal impact. It's not a very high impact because, you know, ours is mostly a domestic demand-driven economy. Yeah, a few sectors, you know, are certainly, you know, impacted by it. You are aware of those sectors. And we have given out a relief package. The government of India has also given out a relief package. I think this is an opportunity for us, and the exporters have already started looking out, improving not only, you know, their productivity, diversifying, etc. And we should be able to we should be able to, come out of this stronger going forward.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Riddhima Bhatnagar of Business Today to ask a question.
Thank you. Governor, my question to you is that RBI has flagged certain concerns about the personal unsecured personal loans. So, what indicators are being seen as of now to combat that, and will there be any interventions by RBI on personal credit segment, retail credit segment?
I'll ask my DG Swaminathan. I think he looks into this more closely than me.
And my second question was on how's the retail CBDC shaping up? I know it's too.
I'll ask my other DG, Ravi Shankar on the left, to answer this if you don't mind.
Yeah. What are the parameters that we track in terms of any portfolio is one is the growth, year-on-year growth rate, and also its relative growth vis-a-vis the other segments. The point in time when we took some macroprudential measures on the unsecured loans was the time when that portfolio was growing almost twice as that of the rest of the portfolios. Currently, as you would know, the overall credit growth is around 11%. 10% is the large industries. Home loans are growing at 11%. Personal loans are growing at 14%. And within which the growth has been seen more on the secured segments, like gold loans or home loans. Unsecured loans have significantly moderated. So there are no indicators at this point in time which are creating a concern for us. We also track the slippages that occur in the portfolio. And although there is a slight uptick in September quarter by about 8 basis points in the unsecured portfolio, overall retail loans have not shown any deterioration. And the third pointer is that the unsecured loans, if you are flagging it specifically, constitutes about less than 25% of the overall retail book. And as a percentage to the entire banking system credit, it's about 7-8%. So it's not a few bips, marginal uptick is not a matter of concern. So there are no measures that are planned at this point in time. And we will continue to keep monitoring this incoming data, and if there are some steps required, we will intervene. But at least I don't see a situation of something that requires a regulatory intervention at this point in time.
The retail CBDC is in good shape, thank you. There are, at this point in time, about a little more than 80 lakh users. The volume of transactions are approaching about 12 crore. The value, if I remember right, is about 28,000 odd crores. But more importantly than these, as I have told earlier, we are focusing on creating a unique use case or unique use cases for CBDC. From that point of view, we were focusing on programmability. There are many such programmable experiments and pilots, particularly in coordination with schemes, etc., of both the central government and state governments, as well as specific products of banks. They are under experimentation, a large number of them. Going forward, we are hoping that some of them will settle down and become in common use, acceptable to an average user. So that is largely the focus. The other focus is on getting cross-border arrangements in. So overall, it's proceeding as per expectations. Thank you.
Sir, 12 crore volume monthly or daily?
So far.
So far.
Thank you, sirs. I will now invite Ashish Agassi of Press Trust of India to ask his question.
Thank you, sir. Governor, sir, in your statement, there's a mention of further reform moves by the government can help the growth process further. What would be the sort of RBI's asks or sort of expectations from further reforms, one? And secondly, sir, was there any discussion on the nominal growth part, sir? how does the MPC look at the nominal growth piece in the whole thing, and did it influence the rate call today?
No, we don't see what the government has to do, it's already doing. So I don't, we don't have any, we do our job. We don't expect. But the government on its own, has taken up a number of reforms, some of which have already seen the day of light, labor, being one, which we saw recently. And so the reference was over there. There is no expectation on our side. So let me, clarify that. Your second question is nominal GDP. Nominal GDP is not, for us it is real GDP that we look at, and that's what, we looked at.
Thank you, sir. I will now request Falakna Syed of Deccan Chronicle to ask a question.
Good afternoon, Governor. Governor, to reduce the stock of unclaimed deposits, which are around 67,000 crore, the RBI came out with an accelerated payout scheme incentivizing banks to reduce that stock. How much of that stock has got reduced in the last 3 months?
I request DG Girish.
These unclaimed deposits, we have actually, if you look at, simultaneously government also came out with campaigning, and also from our side we have also incentivized banks. So result is clearly visible. If I have to give you some number, in October there is reduction of around 760 crore of unclaimed deposits from the DIA fund. And if you compare with that earlier experience, on an average around 100 to 150 crore was the net. So it's clearly visible. And going forward, we believe that it will further accelerate because we are putting lots of effort, both government and RBI side.
So sorry, this 100 and 150 crore is for what duration?
Monthly reduction in the unclaimed.
Okay.
And I may also add that, we are also looking at the portal to improve, that portal to make it more user-friendly. So that will also further help in identifying the accounts, etc., and reclaiming the unclaimed assets.
Thank you, sir. We have 2 more media persons towards our right. I'll request Shri Bhim Singh from Dainik Bhaskar to ask his question.
हमारे लिए जो टारगेट है, लक्ष्य हमारा 4% का है, और जो बैंड है वो 2 से 6% का है. तो चूँकि अभी बहुत कम मुद्रास्फीति है, इन्फ्लेशन बहुत कम है, और आने वाले समय में जैसा कि हमने अपने अनुमान दिए हैं अगले साल के लिए, उसमें भी काफ़ी कम है. 4% से जो कोर जो अंडरलाइंग इन्फ्लेशन है वो कम है. तो हमारा प्रयास है कि ये हम चाहेंगे कि इन्फ्लेशन लगभग 4% के आसपास रहे.
धन्यवाद, sir. I will now request C. Prarthana from Akashvani to ask a question. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Governor. There are concerns of some online lending apps misusing consumer data. So, is there a take? Is RBI doing something about it?
So already, we have, I can mention 2 and others can chip in, on some of the recent measures that we took. One is that we have now, a full regulation in place for digital lending and use of digital means by the banks and the regulated entities. The other is that we also came out with an app or a store which in a way, whitelists the various apps of the regulated entities. So that helps the people in coming to know as to which ones are actually regulated or not. But if there are other initiatives, I think, so I think these are the 2 major initiatives that we have taken in the recent past, and I think it has helped. These measures have helped, and we'll continuously be alert to further actions that may be required on our part. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There's no question from Nikkei. With your permission, sir, we will now conclude this press conference. I would like to thank you, sir, and our top management for patiently answering all the questions and for making this interaction so engaging and interactive. I also thank all members of the media for their participation and wish you all a pleasant day ahead. Thank you very much.
Sir, is there any timeline for the mis-selling guideline? Because in RBI annual report of FY25, you mentioned that the RBI will be coming up with the regulations on the mis-selling. So
our conduct-related measures, to a large extent, take care of it. As I have mentioned, we have now set up a regulatory review cell also. We are continuously reviewing our regulations, and this will also, be part of it. I cannot give you a timeline, but certainly, as I mentioned to you, these are